Welcome to the Under Construction Podcast with me, Martin Williams. Here we talk about how to build or rebuild your life one step at a time. Let's get to work. And welcome to the Under Construction Podcast. My name is Martin Williams. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. You may do so on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and SoundCloud. All the links to the podcast can be found at guidedexpressions.com/with an S. We have reached the final day of the Science of Getting Rich, my series on the Science of Getting Rich. I hope you have enjoyed it thus far. I hope you've listened. If you haven't, please go back to the preceding podcast and, really try to pick up on what I'm putting down concerning this amazing book. This is a book that you can get free of charge pretty much anywhere on the internet. You can also pay for a copy, I should say. And if you do end up paying for it, it's still worth the money because of all the great value that you get out of it and all that you learn from it. So this last day, I'm going to talk about the final chapter. It's actually the second to last chapter of the book, which is entitled Some Cautions and Observations. And what Wallace Wattles basically used this chapter to do was to basically summarize what he spoke about throughout the book. The importance of thinking in a certain way, the importance of understanding that becoming rich is a right. It's not a privilege that many of us have been taught throughout our lives, and certainly as children. Even though I am grateful for all that I have, if you look at riches as a right, as opposed to something that only happens to the fortunate few, it's just your mindset, because you only pursue what you feel you're entitled to. I got that from a preacher some years ago, but it's true. And certainly when I pursued something that I felt that I was entitled to, I got it more often than not. So what does Wattles talk about in this chapter? He basically talks about the importance of remembering the key points of this book. And, in any book, there are a lot of things to remember, but if you get the main points, then, you've basically achieved the purpose of reading the book. And in the Science of Getting Rich, the main points are understanding that you have a right to be rich, understanding that any person on this planet has the ability to become rich, that no matter how bad your childhood was, no matter how bad your young adulthood was, no matter how many mistakes you've made up to this point, and, you may feel like you're in a place where you can't come back from it. You may feel like you've messed things up so much that you can't come back and you can't make something of your life, and you can't have the goals and dreams that you had when you were younger, maybe even much younger. The bottom line is that none of that's true. You can become anything that you want to become if you think along these lines. And basically, from my vantage point, the Science of Getting Rich is really all about faith. And it's basically all about how to cultivate faith and how to live by faith, and not live so much by what you see or what you experience, what you can see, smell, taste, touch. None of those things control your destiny unless you allow them to. So it's important that you learn how to think. It's important that you learn how to take a vision that you have. Maybe you have a vision of getting out of debt. Maybe you have a vision of getting a job or getting your dream job. Maybe your vision is losing weight. Maybe your vision is getting married. Maybe your vision is living in a big house. Whatever that vision is, it's learning how to take that vision and make it crystal clear as if you were holding your hand in front of your face, making that vision so crystal clear that you can't tell whether it's reality or not. And once you create that vision for yourself, and then holding that vision in your mind, and this is something that I think a lot of people miss, is that they get a vision for their life, but then they allow the cares of life to basically pull that plant up, right? And they lose it. They lose that vision, whatever that vision was. And it's easy to do, especially if you are, busy and you got a lot going on. You have a lot of different challenges in your life. It's very easy to lose sight of that vision, but you got to hold on to it, because what's happening is, it's kind of like if you go to an amusement park. Most amusement parks have artists there, right? They have artists where they say, if you sit in a chair, I'll make a portrait of you, okay? And, it's pretty cool. Most people love portraits, right? They love looking at themselves, and, these artists are very good at making these portraits, because, they can do it in 15, 20 minutes. And it looks very close to you and, whoever else is in the picture. But what does the artist tell you to do? The artist tells you that you got to stay still. Why? Because that artist is trying to get an image in their mind, and then they take that image and reproduce it on paper. Well, your angels, right? Your heavenly helpers, okay? They are taking your picture and basically recreating it in your life, okay? And if you understand how that works, if you really get it, then you'll never be worried, because as long as you can visualize, as long as you can see something happen, then that picture can be created for you. And it's amazing how quickly things happen, how quickly things can come into my life shortly after visualizing them. And it makes me, it reminds me, I should say, how careful I need to be about the things that I visualize, and not visualizing things that I don't want any part of, right? But so, Wallace Wattles talks a lot about, creating that vision and then holding that vision long enough so that what he called the formless substance, I call it the spirit realm, can reproduce it in your life, okay? And then Wattles talked about doing things in a certain way, basically doing things with excellence, working with excellence, working with a sense of superiority, not over people, but over whatever you're facing, right? If you approach your work as something that, well, maybe I can do it, maybe I can't, if you approach it with doubt, then you're not going to perform at the level that you could, right? But when you approach your work as something that you own, like taking ownership of it, right? Your production will improve, and your results will improve. Your performance will improve, because you are, basically approaching your work from a place of excellence as opposed to a place of mediocrity. And what Wattles talked about as well is the importance of doing that work, even if you're in a job that you're not necessarily crazy about. And I've used the example of, maybe you're a singer or a writer, or, you're not doing what you are naturally gifted at, but you may find yourself working at a restaurant or a grocery store or what have you. But that doesn't really matter as long as you understand the importance of doing things in a certain way. Because when you do things in a certain way, when you do things with the power of God behind you, right? And you get the power of God behind you when you have that understanding and that assurance that God is behind you, then you won't stay at that place much longer, because you will basically move yourself into your perfect work. I think a lot of people try to move themselves into their perfect work, but they don't change the way that they do things out of ignorance or what have you. Waddles also talked about the importance of giving the impression of increase, right? Giving the impression that a person is richer for having done business with you, for having come into contact with you, versus just a simple business transaction. And then finally, the importance of reminding myself, thinking in a certain way, living in a certain way, the impression of increase, and then having an understanding of riches, right? Understanding that there's different levels of riches, that all riches aren't in the tangible form, but also riches as far as health and riches in of mind, right? That there's riches on different levels, but God wants you to be rich in all these different areas. So all in all, this is one of the best books that I've ever read. It's one of the most important books I've ever read. And I think it's one of the most important books that any person would read if they choose to read it and they choose to study it and they choose to, really apply what Waddles is asking you to do. So I'm so grateful that you were able to listen to this particular series. And that was the other thing. I was searching for it. I'm kind of flying a dead stick here because I had notes, but they didn't sync to my iPad. So I was basically going off memory. And that was the other thing, gratitude, right? So gratitude is so important, because gratitude, Wallace Waddles talks about how gratitude is the form of mental adjustment, right? If you ever find yourself not really able to focus, not really able to, think with the level of clarity that you want to think, if you're not able to anticipate positive things, because a lot of times, your mind can become so overwhelmed that any good feeling, any positive expectation is very difficult to envision in your mind. Waddles basically says that gratitude is the way to adjust that mentality. And I'll go a step further. If you find yourself stressed out all the time, gratitude is probably the express lane out of that. Because whenever I decide, okay, I'm going to spend 5-10 minutes in gratitude, and basically what I do most days is that I write out 20 things that I'm grateful for, right? 20 things that I appreciate. And immediately that shifts my mentality, it shifts my energy. I am in a place of more receptivity when I think from a place of gratitude versus a place of, just being miserable and thinking about all my problems and everything else. So that's probably one of the bigger takeaways from the book is, always take that time to be grateful. Even if it's 5-10 minutes every morning, it goes a long, long way. So now I'm ready to end for good, for real this time. All right. So thank you so much for tuning in to the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, and I will go into more regular content after this. I'll definitely do another series at some point, probably Think and Grow Rich. That'll probably be the next thing, because I've been going through that book and studying that book and making a ton of notes. So I'm very excited to share that with you as well. But that's not coming right away. That'll probably come down the line. Probably by the end of the year, I'll do a series on Think and Grow Rich. But for now, thank you again for tuning in. Go to the website, guidedexpressions.com, and check out all the cool stuff there. Got some cool products. some cool efficiency tools. I got a visualization book that I think a lot of people will get a lot of value out of. So go to the website and check that out. And I will talk to you soon. Don't forget to subscribe to the Under Construction podcast on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and SoundCloud. For more information on Goddard Expressions courses and products, go to goddardexpressions.com/products.